Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories, where today, my wife demands I sacrifice my hobbies just so I can babysit. My wife, Jane, who's 34, and I, male 38, have been together for 5 years now. She also brought my stepdaughter, Emily, who's 9, into our marriage. We have her 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, while she stays at her dad for the other days. From the beginning, Jane told me Emily doesn't need a second father figure as she already has her dad to fill that role. I was only supposed to be a trusted authority figure in case she ever needed anything else. I didn't mind, and I try my best to respect that boundary. She's a sweet kid anyway and doesn't cause trouble, so it's not like I have to discipline her. Her father is also a good guy. Emily's dad recently got married, and his wife has 2 kids of her own who are at their place Wednesday to Saturday and at their dad's Sunday to Tuesday. Emily and her new step-siblings don't get along very well at all. They're always fighting and it's pretty toxic. Emily's dad asked Jane if they can change their custody schedule to match his stepkids to keep the kids apart. It's not a big deal in and of itself because we don't live far from each other, so picking and dropping off is no issue, as she can easily be dropped off at school no matter where she stays. The issue is my wife agreed to it without consulting me. Jane is currently doing a certification course for the next 12 months, and they have classes on Saturday from 9 to 5 p.m. She asked me if I can babysit Emily on Saturdays, but I can't because I play golf with my brother and sister on Saturday mornings from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. This has been our tradition from before Jane and Emily came into my life, and I had always told Jane how important this was to me and my siblings. She asked if I can move to another day, but that's not possible either because my siblings also have jobs and families of their own, so Saturday was the best day for us. I told her she can hire a babysitter, but she doesn't want to spend money when I can do it for free. I told her that wouldn't work for me. She then got mad and said golf is stupid and I should put my stepdaughter above my siblings. That really upset me, so I told her I'm not going to sacrifice my hobbies just so that she can have a free babysitter. For the record, I don't have anything against Emily. I've babysat for her before and she's a good kid. If there was a family emergency or if it was an occasional thing, then yeah, I would cancel golf for that day to take care of her. But I can't give up something this important to me for 12 months continuous. She called me a selfish jerk and slept on the couch last night. So, am I the jerk? Not the jerk. It sounds like this is something that should have been worked out more carefully as a family before agreeing to it. Is it possible that the dad or stepmom changed their kid's schedule as well? That way they have her when Jane is busy with certification courses. Info. Is there a kids class or something like that where you go golfing? Could help integrate the two if a schedule change is not possible. OP. There isn't, and even if there were, it would likely still have to be paid for. My wife doesn't want money to be spent to take care of Emily. She just wants me to do it for free. Not the jerk. I was ready to read this and read you for filth, but this is truly a jerk move from your wife. I think it's totally fair that she asks you to help out, but agreeing to it without talking to you and assuming you'd consistently do it is wild. Why did she agree and then work to loop you in after? It's also interesting that now that your wife needs your help, Emily is your stepdaughter, where it seemed like there was a clear boundary that you aren't her father figure. If your wife wants to revisit what your role is to Emily, totally cool, but it shouldn't be because she needs a babysitter. Not the jerk. Your wife can't say her daughter doesn't need you as a stepfather, but then expect you to step up as a stepfather every single Saturday when she needs you. She can hire a babysitter. Dad and stepmom also need to step it up and work on the relationship between the new step-siblings and get that under control, because there are going to be times where they are all together in the same house. That's just life. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know. The things some people put up with for love. Am I the jerk for telling my parents that they were horrible and saying they shouldn't have any more kids? I, 16 male, was born when my parents were very young. Like my mom was 16 and my dad was 17. Both families decided it would be the best for me if effectively my maternal grandparents raised me and my biological parents got to live their lives. That is not to say I didn't know who my actual parents were. This is not one of those situations like in movies where the mother pretends the daughter's kid is actually her own. I and everyone knew who my actual parents were. My father moved away when he was 18, but my mother remained in my grandparents' house until she was 23 and I was around 7, but that doesn't mean that we were close. She always treated me more like an annoying little brother rather than a son. She didn't like spending time with me, never attended any of my school functions or showed interest in my academic work or took me to any fun activities. Whenever I was talking about my day, she would roll her eyes or change the topic to shut me up. When she moved out, I barely saw her. She just came to family gatherings and said an awkward hi and not even looked at me. It hurt, even if by that point I already considered my grandparents to be more of my parents than her. My father was still living away. They weren't together at this point, but would come once or twice a year to visit his own family around the holidays, and always made it a point to visit me and take me to do some sort of fun activities, like going to the movies or my favorite restaurant, things like that. But to me, he was more like a stranger than a dad, because when I compared him to my friends' fathers who picked them up from school every day and went to their games and played with them on the weekends, I didn't understand why this man who I saw maybe twice a year was supposed to be the same. Anyway, fast forward to a year ago. My father moved back to the same city where we live. He tried to hang out with me more often, but I wasn't really interested, although sometimes I complied. I don't hate him, I just don't know him. I even had a bedroom in his apartment, which is cool because he lives in the center of the city. Behind everyone's back, both my parents had started hanging out, and a couple of months later, they announced they were dating. It was a shock. They asked me to move in with them to my father's apartment, which I refused, but they argued that we could finally be a family. I was about to start an argument on them when my grandma just said that changing school districts would be very inconvenient and I could lose all my friends, and the situation de-escalated by itself, although my parents didn't let go of the idea. My parents asked for me to spend more time with them, and this was particularly frustrating because even though I never had any particular tension with my father, I most definitely do with my mother. I don't like being around her, and she's treated me poorly my whole life, and I feel like she's now only trying to save face because she knows my dad wants me there. Now on to the issue. Last week, they both came into my grandparents' house. They announced they were going to buy a house nearby in the neighborhood so that I can finally move in with them. I immediately said no, and when they said that changing schools would no longer be an issue, I found myself in a corner, and I said that was never the problem, and that I just simply don't see them as my parents and don't want to live with them. That's when they dropped the bomb on us. Not only did they want me to move in with them so we could finally be a family, but my mother was pregnant, so we were going to be a bigger family even. I was shocked, and I blew my lid on them. I told them they were the worst parents in the world, and that they left me for 16 years, and now they were going to bring another kid into the world and do the same to them? And they never apologized for treating me like garbage and like a mistake they made and making me feel like I wasn't supposed to exist and dumping me to be other people's responsibility, and only now that they feel like they care that they actually want to be a family. My mother screamed back at me, telling me I was a brat and that she wasn't going to make the same mistakes twice raising her second baby. And I told her she never raised me to begin with, and my father said they were young and trying to do the best they could. Well, I guess the best you could do was still pretty bad. I stormed out and went to my room sobbing. I've been very depressed for the last week. They both called and texted, but I ignored them. My grandparents agree with me that I shouldn't move and that my parents shouldn't expect me to be all loving and forgiving after how they've treated me. However, they believe they are starting a new chapter of their lives now that they're more mature and stable, which I guess leaves me behind. I've also had time to think that I'm the same age as my mother was when she had me, and what a huge responsibility that must have been. However, I still can't forgive them. Am I the jerk for the way I reacted to the news? I've come to the conclusion that I have a lot of resentment and unanswered questions as well as misgivings about the future that I need to set straight with primarily my father. He needs to know how I grew up, and I need to know why he left me. I also feel like I need to warn him about my mother because I'm worried about my sibling being left and treated like I was. So I'm preparing a list of points and questions that I want to bring up to him, and we'll meet tomorrow or the day after, and I'll confront him with all of these to hopefully get some sort of closure or resolution. Update. First of all, I shared my post with my grandparents, and they were so surprised by it. They were all very happy to see how many people commented about how amazing they are. Also, they took the opportunity to tell me how much they loved me, and I told them the same thing. They are my real parents, and nothing is ever going to change that. There were some tears, and they told me they loved me and how proud of me they were. They never thought of themselves of doing something special or worth so much appreciation. They were just taking care of me the best they could. After that, I started trying to collect my thoughts and arranging a meeting with my father to discuss the things that were bothering me. Why did he leave me? Why did he think he could just reappear into my life like that? That I wasn't going to move in with them, and I didn't consider them my parents because they never acted as such, etc. We met at the park, and he went to hug me, but I stepped away, and he looked hurt, and he just apologized for what happened the other day, and went into this speech about how we could try to transition into living together part-time and respect my boundaries, and I went blank. I didn't expect for him to talk, so I pulled out my phone and just showed him the post I made the other day, and he started reading it in silence. After a while, he read it all and some of the responses, and he just asked me if this was true. And I said yes, and he told me if I had questions, he would answer honestly. I asked what happened when I was born, and he told me that when my mother got pregnant, all options were laid on the table. Not having me, adoption, marriage, Gramps taking care of me, only one of my parents taking me in. My mother was deadly scared of adoption, so he proposed taking me in as sole caretaker and leaving his college plans to stay in our city, but his parents weren't thrilled with that plan and pushed him to go to college so that he could provide economically for me. They offered themselves to take care of me, but they were significantly older than my maternal grandparents. She was an only child. At the time, they were just 40, whereas my father has 5 older siblings and his parents were already in their 60s. And since taking care of me meant taking care of my mother for a while as well, my maternal grandparents decided it was the best decision for them to take me in. Also, intermediately after I was born, my mother had postnatal depression. One thing to note about my father that I didn't mention in my original post is that even when he was in college, he worked part-time to pay child support. And once he started working in a law firm, he started sending more money to my grandparents and set up a college fund for me, which was news for me. My grandparents don't know about this, but my mother does, so I don't know what to do with this information. My father thought of me all the time he spent away and believed he had left me with a happy family and that he was working to give me a better life, but I followed his life through social media. He went to parties, vacations, had girlfriends, and did lots of fun stuff and barely had any contact with me. I asked him why couldn't he have made more of an effort to be a part of my life? Like, I understand if he needed to study in another city and work there, but it's no effort to call or text. Coming once a year just doesn't cut it. He looked ashamed and apologized to me, and I took advice that I saw in a lot of comments here that I would forgive but not forget, and that maybe we can build a relationship going forward. But it will always be marked by his actions in the past. If he hasn't been my dad for 16 years, he can't start now. He seemed sad but accepted my conditions. I told him about my concerns about my mother, told him how she had treated me growing up, that I did not think she would be a good mother for my sibling, and that I wanted to go low or no contact with her. He said that after he left for college and they broke up, he would call her once in a while to check up on things, but that quickly ended, and when he came back, she explained to him that her and I had a great bond, and even though we didn't see each other daily, it was because I was in those teenage years, and that she loved spending time with me and had been a very hands-on mom. I told him that everything she had said was a lie and that she never cared for me. He obviously read this stuff from my post, but I also told him other things, like when she would ask my grandparents for babysitting money, for taking care of me, or that she would call me annoying or disgusting. He was very serious and said he would talk to her, but that he really would not allow a kid to be treated like that, and said that he was sorry for letting that happen to me. Lastly, he told me he would have a bedroom in his house, but he understood perfectly that I would never live there. He was quite emotional at this point and got choked up at this point when he asked me if, even if I didn't consider him my father, I would consider his baby my sibling. I said of course, and that I planned to be a very active part of their life. He started crying and asked if he could hug me, and this time I agreed. I'm happy about the resolution of our conversation, and I really do believe he will be a good parent for my sibling. Update. So a lot of you warned me about crap hitting the fan when my biological mother talked with my dad, and today that's exactly what happened. My father sent me a text early in the morning warning me about the fact that he was going to confront my mom and that he didn't want anything to splash to me, and reassured me that he believed me completely, and I braced myself because I expected for her to call me going off on me or something. I truly don't care about what she thinks about me, but these past few days have been emotionally draining, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for another full-blown confrontation. After a few hours, my mother pulled into our house and let herself in, screaming at me, saying that I had ruined her relationship, and asking me why I had been blabbing about private matters that don't concern anybody. I said that my childhood matters to me and my father, who is also going to be the future father of her kid, and that her actions ruined the relationship. She called me a jerk and said that I was the biggest mistake she's ever made in her life. I didn't know she could still hurt me, but that was a low blow. And I said that I would do anything in my power to take her baby away from her because she was a monster of a mother. We were screaming at this point, and my grandparents, who were in the backyard, must have heard us and entered the room and separated us and heard part of the fight. I was fighting tears, and my grandma walked me upstairs to my room as my grandpa screamed at my mom, "How dare she speak to me that way?" My grandma soothed me a bit and then went to confront my mother with my grandpa. I heard from the door how they ripped her a new one. They confronted her for telling me the things that she did, for treating me like garbage all my life, and for lying to my father. They told her how disappointed they were in her for always treating me with disgust and how many excuses they made for her, thinking she was a kid trying to raise a kid, but she was now an adult and her behavior continued the same, and they said they were on the path of disinheriting her. My mother was screaming about how hard it had been for her and how much she hurt, but my grandparents were having none of it. They raised me, and she was allowed to have the life she wanted and to take all the decisions she wanted without repercussions ever. And I even heard them say that if there was any custody battle ensued over the baby to come, they would take the father's side unless she drastically changed everything about her behavior. They went outside for a while, so I don't know what they said, but eventually they came into my room and my grandparents looked extremely serious and my mother was red and crying and apologized to me through gritted teeth. I didn't respond, but my grandparents said on her behalf that she was going to start therapy immediately and she was no longer welcome in the house. I called my father after this and he was furious. He talked to my mother before going to a work meeting and confronted her about everything. Apparently it was nasty, but he was willing to work on the relationship for the good of the baby, on the condition that my mother would also be working on improving her relationship with me so that whenever I visited them, I wouldn't feel uncomfortable. After he left, he made her promise she wouldn't contact me until they talked again. But there's my mother for you folks. I asked him to think on what's better for himself and the baby and to not hold today against my mother if he doesn't want to. Also, a thing has come up a lot in the comments of my previous post is that my parents only want me as a babysitter and that I should steer away from them and the baby for my own sake. But I want to make a point about that. I can't say anything about their intentions. I know nothing about that, but I am really excited to have a sibling. Growing up, I had a very small family. It was just my grandparents and me. On my paternal side, I had a huge family with aunts, uncles, and cousins, but whenever I went there, I always felt like the odd one out. They tried to include me and invited me for Easter, Christmas, barbecues, and stuff like that. But I really didn't know them, and although they were nice to me, I always felt like I had a big sign on my head that said, "That kid John had in high school." I can't wait to have a sibling and love them and always be there for them and show them what a family is. I want to be the person that they can always rely on, and I want to feel that bond with someone. So even if I have my misgivings about my parents, and I do a lot, I do not about being a big brother. Am I wrong for not agreeing to be a stay-at-home wife when I retire? I'm retiring in about 3.5 months, and my husband and I disagree on how the division of labor should be once that happens. Since meeting my now husband, I've been very vocal about my plans to retire when I turn 40. I've planned my life around this goal, lived below my means ever since college, and gave up things to meet this goal. We got married in our early 30s, so it's only been 7 years since then. He also saves for retirement. I finally got him to up his amount to 20%, but he won't be able to retire until at least 62. He's instead chosen to spend his money on things that make him happy, and I fully support and encourage him in that. Everyone has different goals in life. We're both child-free by choice, so that isn't a factor here. I've said in the past that I'm not going to be doing all of the cooking, cleaning, and finances once I retire because I don't want to replace one job with another. I currently do all of the cooking, most of the finances, and probably 25% of the cleaning. I think that it's fair, as my husband usually works more hours than I do, and I'm a picky eater, so it just works out the best. He recently made a casual comment about how he's going to start working more overtime once I retire because he'll have less household stuff to do. So I asked him what he meant by that, since my retirement doesn't really change anything for him, and that I preferred he didn't work more overtime so we could spend time together still. He said that most husbands with stay-at-home wives don't clean the house. I didn't know what to say because I thought we had already discussed this, so I tried my best to change the subject. But we had an argument about it yesterday at dinner, and he's now giving me the silent treatment. I slept in the guest room last night as he locked our bedroom door and wouldn't let me in. I just don't know how to get through to him. Even though I'll no longer be working, I won't be a stay-at-home wife by my own definition. To me, a stay-at-home partner is the manager of the home and doesn't bring in much, if any, income. Their job is to take care of the house. I'm not trading one job for another, I'm retiring. I'm still bringing in income. I've just planned my life so I no longer have to work 9 to 5 to do so. I have multiple hobbies that I have been super excited about devoting more time to. I love rock hounding, crocheting, and hiking. I'm an unpublished writer and have always dreamed of becoming published. I have a lifestyle blog and a pretty active Pinterest following. I'm not super consistent and they're not big enough to monetize, so I count them as hobbies, not side jobs. I also have a very long travel bucket list. I've already started looking into nonprofits in my area I could volunteer for. I know I still have limited hours in a day, but even if I only volunteer 1 day a week, I still feel like I could be helping our local community. I know we've had conversations about this, and he's always been supportive, even of me leaving for a few weeks every so often to solo travel. He's always been excited for me. I'm totally confused about this change, and I'm freaking out. I thought I communicated my expectations, but he's saying that he doesn't even remember talking about it, and that he's not okay with me retiring if I'm just going to be lazy. I don't see it that way. Am I wrong? How are you currently splitting expenses? We split expenses proportionally based on income. I pay 70% of expenses, and that will continue once I retire. More about husband. To be fair to my husband, this post is all about an argument we're having. I didn't put in my post all the great things about him and all the other things that we agree on. I struggle with depression and anxiety, and he's the only partner I've had that has helped my mental health rather than hurt it. He's usually very understanding, kind, and reassuring. The things that make me good at money management make me bad at enjoying life. I'm very serious and I can be a realist, but he's an outgoing, fun guy who has taught me to live in the moment and relax. The reason I thought to post here is because this argument is not normal for us, and his attitude and behavior caught me off guard. He does pull his weight. All the jobs he does are the ones I'm literally physically unable to do, or ones that I hate and he doesn't mind. So I very much enjoy our arrangement. Locking you out was not okay. I'll definitely address what happened last night. Locking me out is one of the main things about what happened that concerned me enough to ask for outside opinions. But from reading the comments, I think I may have been too quick to shut him down instead of coming up with a compromise or figuring out why he was changing his mind on the topic. When was the last time you discussed your early retirement with him? I went on a weekend backpacking trip about 5 months ago, and when I got back, I made a comment about how I can't wait to be able to hike more often. We ended talking about my travel plans for the next few years. Because I do all of the cooking, that was brought up as well. He wanted me to make all of his meals ahead of time before I leave, but we ended up agreeing that I would stock the fridge and he would either cook for himself or get takeout. If he retired, he wouldn't do more work either. I know this because it was hard enough getting him to agree to do the chores he does now. Because I do the cooking, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, most of the finances, grocery shopping, kitchen cleanups, cleaning, all kinds of stuff. I also manage the repairs. We live in my dream house, but because it's old, it needs a lot of care. My husband wanted a newer home, so I agreed to take on all of that. I also manage the carriage house that we rent out. If I did any more of the chores, I wouldn't have time for anything else. He does landscaping, cleans bathrooms, takes care of his turtles, cleans windows and blinds, and takes care of his laundry and other communal laundry, towels, sheets, etc. I think it's fair as we both do most of the chores over the weekend, obviously except daily chores, and we both have free time. Update. So he came home very late that night after ignoring his phone. We didn't end up talking about it, and I slept in the guest room again. He works from home Tuesday and Thursday, so the next day he was home when I got off of work. I spent the day gathering my thoughts and preparing to have a calm discussion. I tried to remain calm, but he was so defensive and accusatory that I was getting very frustrated. We weren't very productive, and we ended our talk with him denying that I pay 70% of the expenses even though we planned this out and budget together based on it. I told him I'd go through our expenses to prove it, and being the person that I am, I did so the next day. This is where the problem starts. When I was going through our expenses, I found a charge on my husband's credit card from 2 weeks ago that I didn't recognize. It was not a significant amount, so I originally looked into it just to see if it was a household or personal expense to use in my calculations. It turned out to be a bill paid to a law office. For very obvious reasons, I wanted to know more information on why he was being billed by a law office. I looked up the office, and it was a divorce attorney specializing in property division. I logged into his email. I have proof he has given me permission to access his email at any time to go over expenses, and I found his conversations with said lawyer. He was trying to find a way to overturn our prenup so he gets half instead of what's agreed upon in our prenup, and wanted to try and get alimony as well. I had no idea he wasn't happy until we started arguing on Saturday. That morning, he woke me up with breakfast in bed, a total surprise since it wasn't a special day and he almost never cooks. 2 weeks ago, we had a Star Wars movie marathon and ran around the house in a lightsaber battle. Last month, he communicated that he felt like we weren't spending as much time together as we normally do, so I planned more date nights. He's gotten me flowers at least once a week for months now. I just didn't understand why he wanted to divorce, without even trying to express what he was feeling to me. When I went all the way back to the very first emails, late July, A woman we'll call Ashley was brought up. I tried to think of a way to confirm my suspicions without him suspecting that I know what he's been up to. On Saturdays, we sometimes get takeout, so I purposely left my phone upstairs and asked him if I could use his to order the food, and I was taking too long to figure out what I wanted, so he went downstairs to finish what he was doing, giving me more time. It was hard to wait that long without letting on what I knew, but from Thursday to Saturday, I began to get a plan in place. I spoke with a divorce attorney and scheduled my consultation and made sure I had any legal and financial documents I need. On Saturday, when I went through his phone, I found Instagram messages between him and Ashley. By going through the messages and looking at her account, I figured out a lot about her. She seems to be a nice girl he met on Tinder back in May. She's 27 and married to her high school sweetheart who can't bring in enough income for her to be a stay-at-home wife. Considering my husband works in tech, and by looking at his messages, lied about how much he makes, he's obviously the better option. He's lied to her about wanting to have kids and has told her that it's the reason he's unhappy in our marriage. I don't know what he's thinking she's going to do when she finds out that he had a vasectomy. Ashley is apparently willing to do all of the duties that I'm not. From cross-checking dates, when he's supposed to be hanging out with his friends or at a work thing, he's actually with her. He has a weird work schedule, so she sometimes comes over to our house on the days that he works from home and I'm in the office. She's convinced that after they both go through their respective divorces, that they'll live in the house together, get married, and have kids. He's just gone along with everything she says. He's told her that I'm lazy and hardly make any money, and that I wanted to quit my job and not do any work, which is why he's finally gotten the courage to leave me. He said that he's taking extra care in the divorce because he doesn't want to leave me with nothing. He's also told her I changed my mind about having kids and that I'm denying him his desire to continue his lineage. Now you may be thinking, are you stupid? How did you not know? The answer is, I had no idea, and I must be dumb as he played me for a fool. I'm trying to put some humor in this for my own sake, but I'm sobbing as I write this. I just got back from my new attorney's office with a lot of forms to fill out, and I'm so overwhelmed and still feel confused for some reason. Like this must just be a really bad dream. I reached out to Ashley's husband, so they're probably heading towards divorce as well. He seems like a nice enough guy, also totally blindsided by the affair. I told my husband I was divorcing him last night and told him he could either sleep in one of the guest rooms or get a hotel room. He chose the latter. So that's my update. Our prenup has a 99% chance of holding up in court, but we also have an infidelity clause that I'm hoping to prove so I can keep 100% of the house. I was willing to put my dream house in the infidelity clause because I knew I would never cheat. He was fine with it at the time as well, but is now blowing up my phone about it. If I can't prove his affair, which is unlikely considering the evidence I have, I would have to pay him about 25% of our equity in the house, which is enough for a down payment on another house, so he wants me to not bring his affair into our divorce, which is weird to me since he had no qualms with bringing the affair into our marriage. Did he text you about not bringing up the affair in the divorce? Because that's evidence. Yeah, I never said he was the smartest. In the texts, he's saying to not bring up Ashley, doesn't mention an affair, and that she shouldn't be involved in our divorce, that we should keep things to ourselves, etc. But I sent myself screenshots of the messages from his phone that prove infidelity. About his lineage line, the funny thing is that he just made it up. He got a vasectomy before we even met and is even more staunchly child-free than I am. About Ashley, I'm pretty sure she'll find out the lies from her husband since I told him everything. I'm now hoping her husband will get a big promotion suddenly or something where he's finally making enough money for her, but now that they're divorced, she'll just be stuck with my husband or left finding someone else. I wonder how long he's been doing this. OP, I know they met on Tinder back in May, but I don't know if he's ever done anything else like this before. Since it's very likely I'll be able to prove infidelity in court, I don't necessarily need to know if he's had other affairs, but I hope he'll tell me the truth if I ask. Maybe he will if I ask him after the divorce is settled, so it wouldn't hurt him at all. It turns out Ashley is staying at the same hotel as my husband. Go figure. Make my life difficult for nearly a decade? I'll make you look like an idiot. When I first left home to go to university, my parents co-signed a mortgage for me on an apartment-style condominium in a small Canadian city. This was 20 years ago, so it came in at a whopping $52,000. They thought that this was a much better and economical choice than trying to find an apartment and deal with landlords. I loved the idea and moved into my new home. The building was almost entirely populated by the 65-plus crowd. It was small and only had 24 units split into two halves. I had a basement condo. It was a nice place, nothing fancy, but amazing for a student. I was young, 19, but I was quiet, kept to myself, and didn't do the whole party thing. I got along with most of my neighbors. I'd help them out moving heavy things or carrying groceries upstairs. I was acutely aware of the age gap and the general image of a university student, so I made sure to be just an all-around great guy to avoid conflict. The one person I could never see eye to eye with was my upstairs neighbor. For a 70-year-old woman, she couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, but she walked like an elephant. She'd have gospel music on her TV at max volume at 5 a.m. on Sundays. She'd make remarks about, "that darn kid," whenever something was left out of place. She even went so far as to accusing me of breaking into her car and making a police statement saying she saw me do it. Unfortunately for her, I was out of the country on an internship at the time, but still she persisted being a pain in my side. I tried to approach her about the TV issue, and her response was to make sure that it was no longer just Sunday. After a couple of years of attempted diplomacy, it was clear that nothing I did would make things better. Others in the building probably knew she had it out for me, but why would this adorable little old lady try to lie and get me thrown out of the building by the condo board? She tried at least 11 times while I lived there. 7 years into my time living there, I was at my job with an ambulance service just north of the city. I got called to a shooting. It happened over a neighbor's land dispute. The neighbor survived, but there was of course going to be a police investigation. The investigating officers called me to get a statement and offered to just come over to do it, rather than have me travel. One of them was a constable I'd worked with quite a bit, so I said sure. We set a time for about an hour after I'd get home from work. I was just getting out of the shower when they buzzed to get in the building. I said, "Come in, I'll be out in a second." I hit the door buzzer and quickly grabbed some pants and a shirt. I heard them come in and then walk upstairs. As I'm trying to throw on some clothes, I hear them knock on my upstairs neighbor's door. They introduced themselves as being from the RCMP Major Crimes Division and that they were looking for me. She says, "Oh, he lives downstairs. What do you want with him?" They thanked her and informed her that they couldn't say as it was an active investigation. My heart sank, but then I had an idea. It only took about 15 minutes to do my statement and they went on their way, and then the fun began. I knew the rumor mill would be starting. She would tell everyone that would listen that Major Crimes was looking for me and that I must be some sort of criminal. I decided to see where this went. Pretty soon, I'm getting side-eyed in the hallway. Neighbors are steering clear of me, so I know she's been talking. Turns out, I've been arrested for all kinds of crimes and I must be out on bail according to her. I found this out when one of my neighbors, who was on the condo board, showed up with a letter demanding an explanation and threats to have me kicked out. I asked him what this was all about, and he said, "Well, Linda sent us a letter about what happened, and we had to have an emergency board meeting because people don't feel safe with you here." I said that per the bylaws of the condo board, before any action could be taken, I could request a meeting to review and provide a defense. Linda was on the board, so I knew that she'd be there. They set a date for a week from then, but I was given a caution that it didn't look good for me and that I would have to do a lot of explaining. The meeting day comes. Linda is sitting smugly looking at me. The other board members are giving me dirty looks. The board president asks what I have to say in my defense. I stand and quietly distribute a letter on RCMP letterhead signed by the regional superintendent that says, "Mr. Zenmedic is not under suspicion of any crimes, past or current, and has not been arrested, detained, or questioned as a suspect in any criminal matter. His duties as a paramedic will often require him to make statements in regards to ongoing investigations, and in this instance, on this date, investigators had gone to obtain a statement about an ongoing investigation for which he was professionally involved. At no time did the members discuss, disclose, or in any way indicate that they had any involvement in any wrongdoings. I am deeply saddened by the necessity of this letter, and we will be reopening an investigation into a previous incident regarding false statements made against him." You could tell when people read and understood it. The dirty look shifted from me to Linda. She exclaimed that it must be forgery. She witnessed me being led off in handcuffs. She pleaded that they should believe her. It didn't help. I stood and addressed the board and outlined the years of mistreatment from her, including the false accusations of breaking and entering her vehicle. I informed the board that on advice of my lawyer that I do not discuss the matter further with any member of the board, as Linda being part of it and using her position for the purpose of harassment opened the board as a whole to litigation, and I was still weighing my options. The next day I had a knock on my door. The board president had informed me that Linda was removed from the board and that she was given a warning about her conduct, and that any further harassment would result in proceedings to have her removed from the building. She also had a visit from police with a summons for providing a false statement and obstructing a peace officer. She had to attend court. She pled guilty to both and was given a suspended sentence and 1-year condition not to harass, threaten, or intentionally inconvenience me in any way. If she abided her conditions, she would receive an absolute discharge, meaning it would be removed from her record, like it never happened. I moved to another province before her year was up, but for a brief period of time, I actually got to sleep in on Sunday mornings. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.